This Way Up with Angela Yee. And how exciting is this for me? Dr. Thema Bryant is here with me, a New York Times bestselling author, clinical psychologist, but also a professor of psychology at Pepperdine University. And you have this book, Matters of the Heart, Healing Your Relationship with Yourself and Those You Love. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I am so excited to be able to talk about this book.
You know, it's important. We do this Ask Yee segment every day, and I've been doing this like for years. But there's a lot of times that people call up with questions, and I'm like, we need an expert in the building for this, because I can give you my life experience, and sometimes things like, I know what you should do, but a lot of times things are much deeper than that. And I saw you previously with Mel Robbins. I love when you did her podcast.
Oh, thank you.
But one thing that you talked about was also why a clinical psychologist is so important. It's not just like talking to your friends or talking to your significant other.
Yeah, it's so important for people to have a place where they don't have to do the labor of taking care of the other person. So if I'm talking to a friend or a family member, one, as you said, they're coming from their life experience, which may or may not be identical to yours. And then a lot of the stress and sometimes trauma that we carry really takes an understanding to unlock that when people don't have that sensitivity, they can either lead us astray or make advice that's kind of based on assumptions or a limited knowledge. So we want to create space for our mental health, and then to talk about our challenges with people who have that background and who can give us their full attention and full knowledge without it being stressed or burdened. But it's a real place for truth.
Dr. Thema Bryant, before we get into anything, I have to ask you, what made you decide this was the work that you wanted to do?
So there was a beginning part, which is like when I was a very little child, I'll say preschool. I was asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said I wanted to be a house for the homeless. Oh. And so I was told, you can't be that. You have to pick something else. And so recently, me doing this work of psychology, someone said to me, but you did become a house. And really creating a safe space for people to be cared for, to be heard, to be nourished. And in terms of my background, growing up, I was a pastor's daughter.
Okay.
And so people would, especially in our community, would call their pastor first if they were having emotional challenges, family challenges. So I grew up being aware of pastoral counseling. And then when I found out that a psychologist was a profession in and of itself, I said, I think that's me.
It's interesting. I remember in school, I had two classmates, and their parents were psychologists, and I feel like in some ways it messed them up later in life. You know, is that a real thing?
Well, I think that here's an unfortunate part. Some people go into psychology but have never done their own work.
Okay.
Right? So taking the classes is not sufficient. You could memorize terms, but have you done actually like the internal work, your own internal healing, so that you can show up more authentically, more lovingly, more graciously? And so, you know, one of the things I did, I have two kids, during the pandemic was for us to have time to talk about like what was the best and worst part of your day. And I wouldn't just ask them, I would give my answer too.
Wow.
Right? So creating an atmosphere where we don't have to pretend, but we can say like, you know, missing my friends or not being able to go outside or whatever it is, for there to be truth. So there are people who are in the profession who need to take pause and do their internal process.
Right.
Yeah.
I can see that. And right now, we're watching everything that's been unfolding. Sometimes watching the news can be really tough.
Yeah.
And I say that for myself, too, because I'm watching every day. It's like something new is happening, something new that we're sounding the alarm on, something that we can't believe that X, Y, and Z is happening. What do you say to people about the balance of paying attention to what's going on in the world, looking at social media? Because I look at it for work all the time, but it's disturbing to me at times also to see what the things are that people are saying. And I think right now, even the algorithm is feeding us certain things, especially if you happen to be on X. But what do you say to people who are like, I want to know what's happening, but it's also just really weighing on me?
Yeah, this is so important because we can be in a constant state of stress and panic. So we don't want to go to the other side of that where people are checked out and are like, oh, I just don't watch the news. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, people tell me that all
That's
the time.
right. They say I'm protecting my peace. But there are real things happening that, as you're saying, we want to be informed about. So I would say monitoring the time you give it. Because since we're in a 24-hour news cycle, you could leave the news channel on all day long. And so you're just hearing that over and over again. And now they call everything late breaking news, right?
Everything.
To keep your
Every
attention.
second, breaking
yes.
news.
And so to say, I'm going to give it this amount of time, or some people will switch to written news so that they'll skim the article or get the highlights. But to say, I'm not going to give it all my day. And then in terms of your social media feed, you want to balance it out because some people are sharing information from a place of despair that ends up making you feel more powerless, right? Versus some people, they're like, these are challenging times and these are ways to take care of yourself.
Right.
Or these are challenging times and this is what community members are doing. So I would say check in with yourself to say, do I feel edified, nourished, empowered as a result of what I'm consuming?
You know, I had Roy Wood Jr. up here the other day, the comedian. He has a new special on Hulu called Lonely Flowers, and he was talking about how we don't have the same connections anymore. When we're doing things, we're going to it's hard to even get a person on the phone sometimes. When you're going to the supermarket, we're checking ourselves out, or we're having to call someone just to open up the case so we can get something from out of there, or we're just ordering things online. Just a lack of connections with each other. What do you say to people today that are feeling like, I don't know how I'm ever going to meet anybody, or I just feel really empty?
Yeah. It's so important for us to remove any stigma or shame around that, because often we think everybody has their people but me. And the reality is so many people are feeling disconnected. And sometimes you might see those people on social media or even in public with other people, but still feel like they're not known, they're not seen, they're not really understood. Because you can be in the presence of somebody and still feel very lonely.
Yes, you can.
Right? And so then for us to say, I don't have to be embarrassed about it. And because I realize how common it is, then I can realize that there are more people who are looking for connections too. You know, sometimes we're afraid of I'll look like a loser if I say to someone, you want to grab coffee?
Right.
Not knowing that person may love to have a connection as well. So it's to take the risk and to know there are people who want deeper connection.
Okay, let's just say, now back to somebody saying you want to grab coffee. Let's just say we don't really want to, but we feel like, I feel bad saying no.
So here's the gift of honesty, right? If I say yes out of guilt or lack of interest, that's going to lead to another request and another request. So now you are abandoning yourself, and this person now thinks y'all are best friends, right? So if I already know we don't have a lot in common, or we don't really click, or for whatever reason, it's better to be honest earlier. Sometimes we're avoidant because we're afraid of hurting people. But then if you just play that story out, they're going to end up being hurt eventually. And then it took even longer. So I would say free people and give them the gift of your honesty so then they can meet people who actually want to be with them.
I want to talk about a quote that you had. The story they have created about you reveals a lot about them. Be at peace. I think that is an amazing quote. So we need to talk about that a little bit, because I think there's times that there's people who are in our lives that maybe have a perception of you based off of expectations that they had of you, or something that just the relationship goes left and it doesn't work out. And now there's somebody going around saying these things about you that can be damaging, that can be hurtful. And then you feel like you have to defend yourself. And it's sometimes that turns into just such a cycle.
Yes.
And I don't think that hasn't happened. That's happened to everybody at some point. Somebody has a whole other story about you based off of an experience that they had with you or something that they may have created, as a reason. So can you explain this? The story they have created about you reveals a lot about them.
Yes. So often it reveals a lot about their prior experience with other people. And they may be other people who look like you, maybe other people who are in your position. And so then people make assumptions. It's like the quick conclusion. The example that comes to mind for me is if someone sees a woman who is, let's say, disheveled, not the shiniest person, and they're kind of quiet and off to themselves, people would often have compassion for her and say, oh my goodness, like maybe she's insecure or nervous, or like, let me be kind to her. If you are a very attractive woman and you're just quiet, people will interpret that as standoffish. You must think you're better than us, or she must think she's cute. Like this whole narrative where it's the same thing. This person is just not an extrovert, right? And so then I put on you my past experience with people who I have deemed attractive or people I have decided are successful, is that they must be rejecting me, as opposed to they're just over there living their lives. And so we have to be careful about creating meaning. Right? It's like if someone walks in this room who you know and they don't speak, and I say like, why do you think they didn't speak to you? Like we would usually say they're mad at me, or, we create a narrative. They might be in their head because they just saw like a really bad text or email and they really didn't see you, right?
Right.
So for us to slow down in our snap judgments around people, and then when people are making judgments about us, to really resist the urge to prove to people who we are, right? To be settled in myself, right? To know myself and to know people who actually want to take the time to get to know me will get to know the real me.
I want to ask you also, as a tenured professor at Pepperdine University, what is something that you've noticed about students after the pandemic versus before? Is there anything, because I know there's a lot of studies about how that's affected, in particular, younger people?
Yes. So that isolation has been so difficult. Many people had to go through, let's say, birthdays alone, holidays alone, and even in the pandemic, the loss of loved ones. So having to like grieve alone. And so for some people, they adjusted to that and so then prefer to stay in the house, or social interactions are more uncomfortable or awkward for them. And then for other people, they are so desiring it that sometimes they can get ahead of themselves and saying like, this is my new bestie. And it's like, do you all know each other? So that it definitely had that social effect. But it also forced people to find some other resources online and find communities online. So it's one of the reports the American Psychological Association did around social media and young people, is for some people, especially depending on where they live, that is their place of belonging, right? And then for others, it's comparison and not feeling enough because of, who you're looking at someone's curated, censored life and thinking like that yours is inadequate.
We had a listener the other day call up Asky, and she was talking about the kind of guys that she's dating, and none of them want to be in a serious relationship. They tend to be younger. And I was like, well, have you tried online dating? And she said, that's for losers. I want to get Dr. Thema, Bryant, I want to get your view on people connecting in that way, because I do know a lot of successful relationships that have come from that, but there are still people who feel like, ooh, I don't want to do that, but they're craving this connection. I want to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think that it can work for and has worked for a lot of people. And if you're drawing a certain type of person, I would encourage two things that may seem opposite. One is look at your profile, because sometimes the pictures we post and the way we talk about ourselves can give people an impression that may or may not be true.
Like if you're doing shots and
right, right. So it's like if I'm presenting as like party up, and now I'm like, how come no one wants a commitment, right? So they looked at that and didn't think that's what you wanted. And then I'm gonna give the total opposite of that, which is people who are not serious, or who are players, or who are clowns, approach everybody. So instead of thinking like, what's wrong with me? My question is not why did they approach you, is how long did you entertain them?
Okay.
Right? Once you see that, like, they're like, oh, I'm not ready for all of that, but you continue to engage, now we have kind of that breadcrumbing where I really want to feast, but because they call or text, sometimes I'll take it because it's better than nothing. But we can fill ourselves with the crumb givers. And what I like to say, I learned early on, is sometimes you have to choose none of the above.
Right.
Right?
And keep the slate clear. So when
That's
the right thing comes
yes,
along.
you're available. Or when I was younger, I did think like you pick the best out of your options.
Right.
But sometimes you don't have good options. So the best is
The
still
best
a
of
best.
Yeah.
The best of
I don't
the
want
worst.
the best of the worst.
Yes, yes.
Now, the book is called Matters of the Heart, Healing Your Relationship with Yourself and Those You Love. And you say one of the greatest determinants of wellness is the quality of our relationships.
It is.
How can we work on having better quality relationships, whether it's our friendships, work relationships, significant others?
Yeah, so one of them is quality time. Sometimes we are so focused on work or so focused on ourselves that we neglect our relationships and take people for granted. So to be intentional, if like someone is my friend, or even family relationships that I want to nourish, romantic relationships, can I protect time for that? Can I give that time? And then a big part of it is acceptance versus picking people with potential. Right? So if I pick people with potential, then I'm trying to make them into something else.
Right.
So that's a setup for them to be frustrated and for you to be disappointed,
for
right?
sure.
And so a part of it is like in my selection process, right? When I pick a good friend, like we can see some of those characteristics from the beginning, right? The quality of the person. So I would say the selection is a part of it, and then self-awareness and self-reflection, because we're often in this like quick to cut people. At the end of every year, they're like, I'm cutting people.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, can you work on anything? Can we? And so for me to be honest about what are ways that I could show up differently as a friend, right? And for me to be able to take feedback, because that's harder to hear, but we may be sabotaging some of our relationships and don't know it. So being willing to hear it.
It's interesting because I do feel like I used to be very forgiving of people and circumstances. And I find that it's been a burden on me. So I've had to learn to take people for who they are and just, okay, they did this. I gave them, a conversation about why this is not appropriate. And, I saw that you did that and moving forward. And then I give you the warning. And if you keep on doing it, I have to protect myself.
That's important. And I think that's a part of the self-awareness. Some of us are quick to cut and some people don't ever cut.
Right.
And we just keep giving grace and giving chances. And so it's the importance of knowing, as you said, I've given them the feedback. I had the conversation. I shared what was hurtful or what I didn't like, and there's been no change, right? So now it's not like I just wanted them to read my mind. It's they're unwilling to show up in the way that I need or in the way that I find healthy. And so being able and willing to let that go, because we can't force people to be who we want them to be, right? So it's like, you have shown me who you are, and I choose to step back.
How is that when it comes to family?
Yeah.
Because sometimes family members can show you who they are. But you also feel like, well, that's family. What if it's your parent and they've done really hurtful things to you, but you don't want to have regrets later?
Yes. Yeah. That's such a good question, and one people have to wrestle with. There are some people who conclude that even though they're family, I have to eliminate contact with them because it's unhealthy for me. For a lot of people, they struggle with that because, as you said, feeling like this is family, so they have to be given more grace. And what I would say to that is moderation and boundaries, right? That just because I say, like, I'm not going to cut you off, Now, do I have to spend every weekend at your house? Do I have to spend every holiday with you? Or I say for some people, when you go there on the holidays, you can say, I'm sitting at the kids' table. Or like if they need somebody to run errands,
The kids' table's always fun.
Oh, it's fun. It's fun. So, and I would say working to heal our wounds so that people's dysfunction doesn't hurt our feelings so much. So you may have that one aunt who's going to like criticize your looks or criticize you for still being single,
right,
or say you still don't have children. And so I have to not be surprised by people who continue to be themselves. Right? It's like they're going to always have something to say, and it's not going to sting.
I'm ready for it.
Yes, I'm ready, and it's not going to sting as much because I don't agree with them. I'm no longer waiting for their approval.
Man, and one more thing I want to talk about as far as matters of the heart. Love and someone who you realize just does not love you. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we make excuses for people, right? Yeah. We see all of the signs and someone else from the outside can tell us what it is. Mm-hmm. But us in that situation, and you know, sometimes we cut people off because they're not telling us what we want to hear. Mm-hmm. And we end up staying with somebody because we're used to certain things, or we feel like things will get better, it will change, or you don't want to desert a person. Mm-hmm. So how do you release somebody who doesn't love you?
So the first thing is to recognize they're already gone, right? They're gone. Mm-hmm. So it's more accepting that they are not emotionally connected to me. So it's more accepting the truth instead of having to do something. It is more, I have to give myself permission to see the hard truth that this person doesn't want me for any reason. Mm-hmm. And to kind of change my script, because the story we can tell ourselves is that I'm unlovable, or
what
this
did
is
I
the
do?
Right.
Yeah.
So if I dress differently, if I talk differently, if I do these things, that I'm going to heal them with my love. And that is a setup of always the relationship being unequal, because they have shown you with their behavior that they're not really interested. And sometimes we fear that we'll be alone. So we act as if like this is my last chance for something. Mm-hmm. And a part of that can also be our own emotional unavailability, because people who are interested in us, we're not interested in. Isn't that funny? Right? There are people who would like love to treat you great.
Yes,
and you're like,
but I want to fight for this.
Right.
And I want to win this over here.
I want the one who doesn't want me.
Right.
And so to settle with ourselves of releasing them to make room for people who are going to choose me, and to heal the parts of me that made me feel like I have to convince people, right? So when I'm clear I'm enough and mm-hmm. that I'm worthy, and I may not just be this person's cup of tea, or they might not be ready for it, doesn't matter the reason, because like you said, we'll justify, and that will keep us in it much longer,
right?
Instead of just saying, whatever reason, it's not reciprocated.
People will say, oh, men cheat, or why don't I just stay with this? Because if I go out there, it's just going to happen to me with a stranger.
Yeah. So this is, we hold on for familiarity, mm-hmm. and we hold on for fear, right? The fear that I couldn't be treated better. So when we see people being treated well, we either say that must be a lie, or it's an act, or we say some people deserve that kind of love, but I could never get that. So then I got to hold on to what I have. So it is both believing that in my current circumstance, the bad outweighs the good. I feel worse about myself mm-hmm. because of the way this person treats me. And to believe that I can be loved better even if it's not immediate. Because that's the thing that trips us up. Sometimes we cut it off mm-hmm. and then we're tired of waiting. So then we text them back.
Right. I'm bored.
Like, right. Hey, what are you doing? Right. Then we're back in that loop again. So it's to develop the capacity to enjoy, even if you don't enjoy it, to deal with the in-between time, so that you don't keep surrounding yourself with that which doesn't honor you.
As a friend, how do you talk to someone who's going through that?
Yeah.
Right? Because, we all have that friend, and we're like,
Who
sis,
keeps going back.
who keeps on going back.
Yeah.
He already went on vacation with another woman. He did X, Y, and Z. He told you he doesn't want to be in a relationship, but now he changed his mind. You haven't met his family. It's just all these different things, and she keeps on going back. What do we do as a friend to be a good friend to somebody in that situation?
So one of the things is to not abandon them, because sometimes what ends up happening is all the friends are tired of them.
Right.
And so then their only friend is the shady partner. Right. So that keeps them in. So even though we could say like it's frustrating to say my biggest priority and goal for you is for you to be happy and for you to be treated well. So if this person's going to do that for you, I love it. If they're not going to do that for you, whenever you're ready to make a shift, I'm here for you, here to help you like through that process. And I would say affirming them, encouraging them, because those dynamics kind of shatter their self-esteem, right? Their self-worth. So then they don't feel good about themselves. So having the friend who says, you're amazing, right? You're beautiful. Yeah, I love talking to you. Like to affirm and celebrate them can help to build them up so they would be strong enough to step out of that.
And can we say he ain't shit?
Yeah, come on, you can say that.
Okay.
But let me tell you.
You should defend him.
Right. That's what I was going to tell you. That usually with clients who are in that circumstance, I actually ask them to tell me about all the good stuff. Right? Because if we focus on the bad, then they do get defensive and they feel like, well, you don't like them anyway. You already made up your mind about them. So I'll say, tell me all the great things. And then they're struggling, right, to think of the good things.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, right. Because people are whole beings, right? So usually a person is not a monster or a clown all the time. So tell me what it was like in the beginning. Tell me about the, what you enjoy about them so that I can see the fullness. And now let's get to the shade, right? So, because if not, what often happens is the person starts censoring. So then they're just not telling you the story, right? And then that's not helpful either.
I want to ask you, we just recently on Lip Service had a guest on, and she is polyamorous. She just proposed to her girlfriend. Shout out to Jerry. What are your thoughts about polyamory when it comes to relationships?
Yeah, I think the importance is going to be honest communication, because sometimes what you have is one person where that is like their authentic truth and authentically what they want. And then sometimes there's another person in that who's going along with it, who may not be
fully into it, but they're trying to feel like they love you.
Yes.
And
so if I love you, then I have to, and then I'm kind of silently suffering or silently disappointed or silently hoping that the narrative is going to change. So I would just say, now that's not always the case, but what I just have seen clinically is sometimes people aren't standing in their full truth.
Right.
So as long as we have people who are operating from a place of authentic integrity, then you can have it blossom.
I just want to give people just some kind words about dealing with these next 4 years. We've seen a lot of LGBTQIA rights and trans rights and, people who are migrants here. A lot of people are being attacked, spoken negatively about. And I just want to know, how do we survive this?
Yes.
And how do we come together as community? Because it definitely feels like we're more divided than we've ever been. And that can be really discouraging for people as we're trying to figure out, how do I go about my day not knowing if, something awful is going to happen in the news coming up, or somebody who I know is going to be targeted. There's just so much going on.
Thank you for that. So the first thing I would say is feel your feelings, because sometimes we feel like we have to suppress or ignore or hide our feelings, and so then we're pretending to be well, right? But instead I like to say, it's healthy to be outraged about outrageous things. And outrageous things are happening.
Yeah.
So it's a sign of my mental health when I can say, I'm disappointed, or I'm grieving about this, or I'm outraged about it, that we don't want to ignore our own humanity. So within our humanity, honor your feelings and note that. And then I would say, to revisit history. We've been saying like, oh, like this has never happened before. Well, if we look at history, it has. Each of the identities you mentioned have lived through hostile times where people who were in power did not honor your humanity. And so we look at the ways in which we survived. A part of it is community. So connecting with people so that we don't feel so alone. And then around the divisions, these different marginalized groups working in coalition is how we shift it, right? If we remain divided and, turn on each other, then we're not operating in our full power. Right. So collective liberation means let's be for the collective. And not only that we fight and stand up for other people, but that they do it for us as well, to know like these struggles are connected. Right. And then I would say the arts are a wonderful way to heal and express ourselves through our music, through our dancing, through our spiritual practices.
Food.
Yes.
We love to come together to eat.
Like come around.
Yes,
come together around food. It's true. It's true. To be, that it can be a love language, right? The way in which people care for us and bake for us.
Yeah.
I would just say, in addition to the food, if we can have the conversation. Because sometimes it's the emotional eating and the silence, right? But if we can have real community where we break bread together and do real talk, not only about the despair or difficulty, but the way forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when they go low, it's hard to go high.
It can be. And, and I would say when people pull us outside of ourselves, that also doesn't have a good feeling. Right. It's
I don't like to give people that power to make me not be who I am.
Yes. Because then they know those punches are landing.
Right. I feel like that about relationships too. I never want to be with somebody where I can't function as who I really am and they have me acting like out of character. I'm like, this is not for me.
Right. And that's so important because some people will say, you made me act like this. Well, then you want to make a different choice. I want to be in the presence of people who pull out the best in me. Right. And
where that's a better way to look at it.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Dr. Thema Bryant, thank you so much. I appreciate this conversation. Matters of the Heart, healing your relationship with yourself and those you love. Such an excellent conversation. I'm glad you wrote this book. And I do want to say, what made you decide this book now?
Yeah. The biggest questions people usually ask me on social media or in therapy are about relationships. So when they're done well, they allow us to soar and feel nourished and protected. And when they are not done well, it's heartbreaking and it can affect every other area of our lives. I've seen people mess up in school, mess up in work, their health fails because of unhealthy, toxic relationships. So we want to get it right so we can soar together.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.